I'm going to give it another minute just to let folks come on in. Okay, let's get things started. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Kay from Greenlight and we're excited to welcome you to our online event series, Squawkin Sports, hosted by Patrick Sauer and David, who unfortunately is not able to join us tonight. So for this installment, we'll be chatting with Todd D. Snyder about his new book, Beatboxing, How Hip Hop Changed the Fight Game, along with featured guest producer Bronze Nazareth. So you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Todd, Bronze, and our host, Patrick, for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple of different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author or any panelist, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Beatboxing, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. We're excited to be able to offer actual shopping in our bookstore locations, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, and you can purchase Todd's book and many others on site or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Your series hosts for Squawkin Sports are Patrick Sauer and David J. Roth. Patrick has written for many large publications you've heard of and even more small ones that no longer exist. He's a founding member of the Billings, Montana to Brooklyn sports writing pipeline. David, who unfortunately wasn't able to attend tonight, was an editor at Deadspin and is now a co-founder and co-owner at defector.com. His writing has appeared in The New Republic, The New Yorker, Food and Wine, and The Baffler. Joining our featured author in conversation tonight is Bronze Nazareth, international underground hip-hop artist and producer hailing from Detroit, Michigan. Bronze was picked up by RZA as a Wu-Tang producer in 2002 and introduced to the world in 2003 via his production on RZA's Birth of a Prince album. Bronze signed to Baby Grande Records in 2006 and released his first solo album, The Great Migration. Our featured author tonight is Dr. Todd D. Snyder, an associate professor of rhetoric and writing at Siena College in Albany, New York. His scholarly research draws from a variety of fields: rhetoric and composition, community literacy studies, communications studies, cultural studies, and critical theory. The son of a West Virginia boxing trainer, Snyder's work is also intimately connected to his life experience, the theme of working class masculinity serving as primary focus of his writing projects. In his new book, Beatboxing, Snyder uncovers the unique connection between hip hop and the sweet science, tracing a grassroots cultural movement from its origins in the South Bronx to its explosion across the globe and ultimately into the charged environment of the prize ring. Featuring interviews with champion fighters and music legends, this is the definitive book about an enduring phenomenon and is a must read for boxing and hip hop fans alike. Todd is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then he'll be talking with Bronze, Patrick, and with all of you. Please take it away, guys.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thanks to everyone who's in attendance tonight. I want to say thanks to Patrick for having me on for the second time. Thanks to my man Bronze for joining the conversation. And of course, Greenlight Books for always supporting my work. The name of the new book is Beatboxing, How Hip Hop Changed the Fight Game. You can hop on Greenlight Books website and you can get it there. If you're in Brooklyn, stop by and check it out. I'm gonna read just a brief excerpt just to get the conversation started tonight. The chapter I'm reading from in the excerpt is called Me Against the World, which was the title of Tupac Shakur's third solo album. And this chapter is about the relationship between Mike Tyson and Tupac Shakur, which in the book, I highlight some of the really important relationships between hip hop artists and fighters throughout the history of both genres. But I feel like no relationship had a bigger impact than Tupac Shakur and Mike Tyson. So I'm just going to read a brief excerpt. It's the beginning of chapter 6 in the book. And the title of the chapter is Me Against the World. Tattooed on his neck, a nod to Italian philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, whose 16th century political treatise outlined the amoral nature of those who rise to power. Tattooed on the right side of his chest, an image of Nefertiti, an Egyptian queen. The left side bore the hip-hop spelling of his namesake, an Indian warrior who, against all odds, led his tribe's final revolt against the Spanish Inquisition. Alongside his upper abdomen, an AK-47 assault rifle. Scrawled along his famous and iconic tattoo, Thug Life, replaced with a bullet. On his right shoulder, the chilling image of a masked goon, a wad of cash in his hand, tethered to the scales of justice, an infant baby resting on one scale, a stack of gold bars on the other. Tattooed alongside his left bicep, the image of a skull and crossbones, inscribed with the word heartless. Tattooed diagonally down his forearm, in Old English font, notorious. On the inside of his forearm, a 7-point crown inscribed with the phrase, trust nobody. On his left shoulder, the image of a vicious Black Panther, symbolic of his family ties to the revolutionary socialist political organization. Tattooed slightly below the panther, a depiction of Jesus Christ, a crown of thorns upon his head, dying on a burning cross. The inscription reads, "Only God can judge me." Framed by a tribal design, diagonally on his right forearm, the word outlaw. A large Gothic cross covered much of his back. Inside the cross, Exodus 1831, a reference to Nat Turner's 1831 slave revolt. Along his shoulders, in cursive handwriting, "Fuck the world." On each side of the cross, tattooed images of sock and buskin, ancient Greek symbols of comedy and tragedy, appropriately listed below each figure, the words "smile now, cry later." Like the tattooed symbols that covered his body, Tupac Amaru Shakur was an enigma, a contradiction. Tupac was not hip hop's first superstar. He was the genre's first crossover success. He was the genre's first legend. He was a larger-than-life cultural icon who, like figures such as Bob Marley and James Dean, lived fast and died young. The story of Tupac's enduring legend is, for better or for worse, unavoidably intertwined with that of the late 20th century's most famous prize fighter, Mike Tyson. Not only were the two men close friends, their lives and careers paralleled. Both were abandoned by their fathers, born into systemic poverty, escaping those daunting circumstances while also falling victim to the so-called trappings of fame and success. Each man was, at times, his own worst enemy. First came Tyson, the youngest heavyweight champion in the history of the sport. It wasn't who Tyson defeated in the ring, but how he defeated them. Even for the most violent of sports, Tyson's fire and ferocity was something new. Never had a heavyweight champion obliterated his opponents with such menace. After watching Tyson crawl along the canvas on his hands and knees, fumbling for his mouthpiece in Tokyo, it was still impossible to imagine him as anything other than the baddest man on the planet. Then came Tupac Shakur, a rapper whose cultural and political significance far exceeded the influence of any of his predecessors. He wasn't rap's greatest lyricist, the king of punchlines or metaphors. He didn't have the quickest flow or even the highest record sales. His influence extended beyond the record business. Tupac albums felt bigger than music. Their significance attracted the attentions of politicians, pundits, and presidents alike. The 5 bullets he had taken in the lobby of Quad Studios would only make his music that much greater, we imagined. In one sense, Mike Tyson is Tupac in boxing shorts, and Tupac is Mike Tyson with a microphone, renowned scholar Michael Eric Dyson suggests. Dyson's comparison is appropriate. In both instances, the rise to power was meteoric. The anger frightened us. The unpredictability kept us watching. The talent captured our imagination. Each man was bound by the cavernous depths of his myth-making, mythologies that far exceeded the boundaries of their real-life accomplishments, which were indeed spectacular. Each man, not unlike the tattoos etched in his skin, lived disassembled. So that's the jump off to chapter 6 of the book in beatboxing. So I'm gonna turn it over to our host tonight, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Look at that is a lovely cover. Can you just open it up there? There you go. There's Pac.
Yeah, Pac says what's up to everybody.
Also, the address of my optometrist on there. Before we get into some of these characters, I want to start. So when you look at this book, the appendix is incredible. You listen to 500 songs, which I know you, and for those who don't know, Dr. Todd teaches a lot of classes in hip hop and lyricism and such, but still going into the book, you're a boxing guy, you're son of a boxing trainer, you're the only diehard fan who keeps up with it that I know. Did you have any idea the scope of what you were going to look at? How many songs, like, how do you just start that process? Even knowing as much as you know about rap and hip hop, I'm just curious. And to that, I would add also, I learned that there is more references to Jerry Cooney than Joe Louis. What the fuck, rappers? How is that possible?
Hey, listen, I don't pretend that my list at the end of the book is the definitive list. But what I originally set out to do was put together a database of 1,000 hip hop songs that reference boxing personalities, fighters, trainers, referees, ring announcers, managers, all of those folks. And of course, our special guest tonight, Bronze, shows up on the list a couple times. But look, that's the way I view the sport of boxing. My father was a boxing trainer, so I grew up in gyms my whole life. But I was a kid who grew up in the 80s, and hip hop was my first love. It was my gateway into literature, my gateway into poetry, my gateway into culture, politics, sports. So anytime I heard a hip hop song that referenced boxing, that always piqued my interest, because those were the 2 compass points to my identity. So when Snoop Dogg says realer than real deal Holyfield, that like, I made me listen as a kid. I paid attention to that. Or if you see like a rapper like Vinny Paz, who borrows his name from the fighter Vinny Pazienza, or Rock Marciano, who borrows his name from the great Rocky Marciano, that always piqued my interest. That was always fascinating to me. So in some ways, to answer your question, I feel like I've been researching this book my entire life. So I put together a database of 1,000 songs, which was way too much to put in the book. So I just picked my favorite of the 500 of my favorite songs that reference hip hop. This was easy work because I've been doing this research my whole life. Nice. These are the 2 things I love most in life, are hip hop and boxing. And I don't believe you can be a true hip hop fan and understand hip hop lyrics and not know a little bit about the fight game. I think it's real hard to do, because
I agree.
You think the first Wu-Tang song we ever hear is Inspector Dex saying, "I smoke on the mic like smoking Joe Frazier."
I never put that together. That's the first line. And he's a Philly guy. He's not even a New York guy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy, right? And I talked to Deck about that. I interviewed him for the book, and he was like, "Look, man, I grew up, everyone in his family were fight fans. All the guys in Wu-Tang were fight fans. And I know my man Bronze, when I interviewed him for the book, this dude watches every fight just like the rest of us."
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Let me ask you then, Bronze, and you can weigh in on this too, Todd. What makes this is a broad question, but what makes for a good boxing song? I know what makes for a funny lyric or a great line, but what makes for a good song? Is it a beat? If you were putting one together as a producer or a writer, is it thinking about the walk up? Is it like an actual ass kicking song? Because to me, the preeminent is always Mama Said Knock You Out, which isn't really a walk. Like, I don't think it was a particular walk up song. It's not necessarily about the history of boxing. And of course the video made it, but just that sound and that one. But I'm curious, as a producer and a rapper, and what do you think too after Todd? What makes for a good boxing hip hop song?
I mean, I think the connection here is kind of emotion. So when you're coming down in the ring, you got some boxers that are, rowdy, they want to be wild with it. That's who you give that song with full energy, crazy energy. But when you got somebody, I think some of the focus boxers, I'll just say Wilder, for instance, he came out to more focused, quiet, brooding music. So I think the perfect actual hip hop song is you can't really name a perfect one. I think you got to pick one that matches the fighter's emotions. And I think it's driven by that, personally.
Yeah.
So I would match the joint to the fighter's personality, maybe their fighting style a little bit, you know what I mean? So I think you got to match that.
Do artists ask you like, I just want a song and go for it, or do they give you a lot of specific sort of advice, ideas? I mean, when you're asked to bring in a beat or something, how exactly does that work for us who know nothing about it?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You look at this artist, you see what their style is, what kind of emotion, what mood they be on. If they're one of the hype artists, you want to give them some a little more energy. If they're a more contemplative thinking artist, you want to give them that focus joint. You know what I mean? So it's like I said, we got parallels left and right in music and boxing, and that's another one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I knew he was going to say that because he's a producer. He's used to matching the voice and the emotion to the sound. But here's the thing. A lot of times, Patrick, those walkout songs, they have to do with regional affiliations too, because like when Reggie Johnson, who's from Houston, Texas, walks to the ring to Willie D, who's from the Ghetto Boys from 5th Ward, Houston, Texas, I know what he's trying to say. He's representing 5th Ward. It ain't got nothing to do with the song or what the song is about. It's representing Houston. You look at Zab Judah, who's a Brooklyn fighter. He's always coming out to Fab or Jay-Z or Shine, some Brooklyn artist. So sometimes it's not even the lyrics of the song when it comes to the hip hop ring walk. It's that regional spatial quality to it. Because, hip hop represents your block, your state, your neighborhood. Like the music has a sound that represents where you're from. And I know Bronze knows that as a producer that, there's an East Coast sound, there's a Dirty South sound. And fighters from those regions like to represent where they're from musically as well. Roy Jones always came out to like Scarface or Little John or something that was sort of Dirty South flavored.
And there's the walk up. There's the walk up point, but there's also just the sort of boxing as a lyric. They're just great one-off lines in a million songs. I mean, the Beastie Boys have a bunch of funny ones, but as you point out, you know all these rap lyrics in your head just from hearing them a million times, but you never thought, oh yeah, the Message has a line, I can't watch the Knicks or the Sugar Ray fight. It's like, right, in 1981, what the hell would they be doing? What would they be doing in the Bronx? Sitting around watching Sugar Ray Leonard on regular TV, not even pay-per-vieue. And there's sort of you can actually just kind of track boxing culture and fighters and outside of the sort of spectacle of it, which became a bigger thing. But in the older stuff, you can kind of like keep track of who's who and what's what. And again, because everybody was watching all the big fights all the time in kind of a way I don't think people do now, which is interesting.
But I'll tell you this, even though boxing isn't as popular on the main stage these days, listen to Griselda, listen to West Side Gun, listen to Benny the Butcher. They're all still talking about the current fighters. So
absolutely.
Boxing's still popular in hip hop. It may not be popular with another crowd, but it is still talked about and rapped about in hip hop still today. And I know, Bronze, you can attest to that.
Absolutely, big time, man. It's because hip hop was like battling in the early days, even with the DJs and everything. So that's akin to sparring. So they're just two sciences that are alike, and there's just the parallels go on forever, I believe, you know, because as a rapper, when you want to get on the track, the ring, you want to have your technique right. You want to be able to, you know, cut into this rapper because you know what he's going to say, or you know what move he's going to pull on stage. You know, and this is if you're battling, and it's the same in boxing. And I also would say it's the same in like studio recording, because you're trying to make hip hop is always about, yo, I'm the illest, I'm the best. So in hip hop, you're always trying to make the better music, the better album, you know what I mean, than the next man or than the previous man. So it's like conquering, getting your technique to conquer, getting your skills up to conquer and get those wins. So, you know, that's
I would argue every facet of hip hop culture, just to piggyback off Bronze, is about competition. Right. I mean, from ciphers on the street where rappers battle, to the DJ battles, to the breakdancing Rocksteady crew battles back in the day, to the
dressing the freshest, you know.
Everything about hip hop is competitive.
Yeah.
And you know, I interviewed Bill Adler, who was the publicist of Def Jam during the golden era, and he said, you know, LL would walk in and Run would be there, and they would start battling. He was like, it was a level of competition. It's like walking in a gym. If you go in a boxing gym, you better be ready to spar. You know what I mean? Unless you know, have your street clothes on if you don't want to spar, because that's how boxing gyms are. It's that level of competition that I think the two sports are intertwined in that way as well. Forget all the socioeconomic stuff. You know, the worst gyms are in the toughest hoods and that kind of thing. Yeah. Just the level of creative, the spirit of competition is in both worlds, and I think that's why the analogies work so well.
Absolutely.
One thing I was thinking about while reading this is there's obviously anybody who loves boxing or hip hop, you have to be somewhat attracted to the underworld elements of it, which can go too far. And I was thinking one of the differences is in boxing, at one point you say all the boxers want to be rappers, all the rappers want to be boxers. But I was curious because at the end of the day in boxing, if you can't throw hands, you're in hand-to-hand combat. You're getting your ass kicked. That is what the ultimate thing is in the ring. So everybody who fought Tyson and talked shit in his heyday, you know, Marvis Frazier, rest in peace. I don't actually know if he's dead, but but in hip hop, and it seems I don't follow. I'll be honest, the SoundCloud thing has escaped me. I don't follow close enough, but there was a lot of character playing because they weren't tough guys necessarily. They might have grown up in tough circumstances, but a lot of it was kind of play acting, which we all saw in the 90s went way too far and people started dying. I'm curious if you could both kind of address the difference between the guys who get in the ring who might want to have side careers in the movies, but they actually have to be tough, versus guys who may have grown up hard, but oftentimes they just have a posse of dudes with guns, or, you know, I mean, there's a play acting element to rap that is not true in boxing, even if they want it to be.
I would argue that to exist in either,
you
got to be good. Yeah, I'll jump in real quick and just say that.
Oh yeah, you have to be good. I just mean you don't have to, like, you have to be good, but there are a lot of been surrounding of. There's a violence that isn't necessarily inherent to being a rapper. But
look at the first 20 years of hip hop history. You know, all of your MCs, all of your producers, all your hip hop pioneers come from lower socioeconomic spaces in America for the first 20 years at least. Today, maybe it's a little different, like you said, with the SoundCloud world. But boxing has always drawn its talent pool from the least. And I think if you want to know the biggest connection between hip hop and boxing is that these are people who've been marginalized in society. These are people who have struggled, who've been put upon by society, and they've tried to use hip hop and boxing as a way out of those negative circumstances.
Yeah.
Now, are there people who play boxing and end up getting hurt? Sure. Same thing with hip hop. People who pretend to be something they're not. But to have longevity in either world, you got to be super dope. And I think it was Big Daddy Kane who said to me, most boxers don't get 5 years, and definitely most rappers don't get 5 years of being relevant. If you can get more than 5 years, then you've proven yourself that that's something. To have that longevity is so hard in both worlds because you get a short window of time to do your thing. And if you're not dope, if you're not good in both genres, you're going to disappear. I don't know, Bronze, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that issue, I think we do diverge a little bit in hip hop versus boxing, but I think that the key aspect there is respect, because if you're doing hip hop and you're doing it at a certain skill level, and people got to admit that you're nice with it, even if you're not selling gold and platinum, you still have a respect, and that respect could go throughout the industry. And then, so I think with boxing, it's the same thing. If you're a fighter who is a beast, but you know, you may not have every win, you might have 6, 7 losses, something like that, but you get respected throughout. I think that is the platform where you could compare those two on an even level, the respect level, you know, because you're gonna get respect. You could be a bulldog, you could be a beast in boxing with a few losses, and it'll be even the top guys don't want to go against you, even if they know they can get that W. But it's a battle. I think that's where those two things could diverge. Is the respect level, man, because you could be a top seller in hip hop, and you know, dudes don't respect your lyric game. Dudes don't respect your bars. You know what I mean? So, it's about respect at the end of the day, you know, for some people.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking a little bit about it. I can never get out of my head that like Ali and Frazier both didn't get shot and killed, and they're like the two best. It's just I've always come back to that thing. Like, how did this happen? Let alone how come it's never been solved? That's a whole other thing. But I always thought that part of it was like because the reputation or the persona you've created gets too big. I guess I was thinking in boxing, you can get a big persona, but if you get punched in the face and you fall down, that persona is out the window. Like you really can't come back from that last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think
it's like Ward Gotti just one, you know, you get knocked down as long as you keep knocking each other down.
Yeah.
As far as the Pac and Big thing, that's a conspiracy theory for another book. You know, I'll let somebody else tackle that.
Indeed.
But you know, no doubt is one of the big tragedies in the history of the genre. Two legends lost way too young, early 20s. A lot of times rappers do mean what they say in their lyrics, though. You know what I mean? Not all this stuff.
That's true. That's true.
The joke is for real. So,
well, let me ask you then.
I think it's true. You got your CV4 dudes out there, but like people that are from like the neighborhood, people that have seen, you know, tough times and really grew up in that ilk. You know, we could tell, man. So like I said, it goes back to that respect thing, man. So, you know, hip hop is in hip hop you could hide the fakeness a little longer, I think, but in boxing you get exposed real quick, man.
My dad used to call the ring the truth machine.
Yes. You know, I love that. I love it.
It's gonna come out when you climb through the ropes. Eventually, it will come out.
that's like the booth, man. I got my booth over here. Booth. That's the truth machine, man.
That's the truth machine too, right? You can have that one, Bronze.
Come by like, yo, I'm ready to spin. I'm ready to go. All right, hit the booth there. And, you'll be surprised how many times the truth comes out.
I want to ask you about Tupac and Tyson, because that is, so I'm 50. Those are my guys, right? And then I feel like you're right. They were both sort of almost on literal fire, you know, at times. They were just untouchable, you know, changing everything, but also, you know, spiraling out of control at times. Well, more than occasionally. But fundamentally, if you talk about rap and boxing, that's kind of really where it comes together first, right? Like in a major way, because obviously there's no rap when Ali's coming along. In the early 80s, you know, it's Sugar Hill Gang is not going to, you know, mix up with Larry Holmes or whatever.
Patrick, just to give it some historical context, you know, I think Ali and Boondini were pre-hip hop pioneers, and I think there would be no hip hop without those two guys. They had a big part of creating the idea, the persona, the attitude of hip hop. But even when we get into the 80s, a couple decades after Ali's prime, you know, Tyson first hooked up with Public Enemy, and I was able to talk to Chuck D and Professor Griff for this book. You know, he was the first boxer to walk to the ring to hip hop music, and that was Fight to Power and Welcome to the Terradome. So I would argue that relationship is sort of the beginning of what this book covers. But the big bang moment is Tyson and Pac, because he didn't just walk to the ring to Tupac's music. Tupac made original songs for Mike, and they were about the fight, dissing Frank Bruno and
Frank Bruno, yes. What was it? Walk to Glory or Road to Glory or something like that.
Glory,
oh man, that's one of my tops, man.
Man, I remember as a kid having my ear up to the TV, and all I could hear was, stand up, Mr. Bruno, rise. Mike Tyson's going to brutalize that ass tonight. That's the only lyric I could hear.
Yeah.
But I knew that Pac had made the song for the fight. And, for a whole generation of kids, that was so exciting. So after Tupac and Tyson do their thing, everybody's trying to do it. And that's where we get these mini rap concerts as guys walk to the ring. But the thing that I think the book points out that a lot of people don't know is those two men were not free at the same time as friends very long. They meet right before Tyson goes to prison for the Desiree Washington case, and they become pen pals, and Pac visits him in prison. Then when Tyson gets out, Pac is already going back in. So then Tyson is sort of a mentor and a friend to him while Tupac is serving his sentence. When Tupac gets out on appeal and he's bailed out of jail by Suge Knight, they're only together as friends for about 8 months. And they really changed hip hop and boxing in that 8 months. Tupac comes out with All Eyes on Me, reclaims his throne. Tyson beats Frank Bruno, reclaims his heavyweight championship, gets another belt from Selden. But the two men were not friends and free together at the same time for very long. But boy, what a shooting star it was, man. It was a typhoon, a hurricane. It shook up the game. And
it's interesting though. The Public Enemy stuff almost lines up with the Customado pre-Don King Mike Tyson, who was very, almost militaristic, and when he was just a world beater, and the personality was just, I beat ass in the ring. And then when Cuss dies or when they separate, and then he expands in good ways and bad, but that's when Don King and things start, and then he meets Tupac when he also goes from being not to a death row guy, and then it does feel like both of them, mostly their fault, but also partially the expectations of being these guys in public really came to hurt them both.
I want to ask this question to Bronze. I think it was Vinny Paz who said to me he felt like Tyson was hip hop's first athlete. What do you think of that? He said, Mike Tyson was hip hop's first athlete to really rep the genre. And this is his quote, not mine. He said, hip hop loved Jordan, but Jordan didn't love hip hop. And he wanted to argue that, Mike Tyson was hip hop's first athlete. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with the Jordan thing. I do. I find it hard to argue that. Vinny Paz is very knowledgeable, in both worlds, obviously. And I can't find nothing to argue that, man. He definitely, brought it out mainstream. The things with Pac, that Road to Glory was, it was trend setting. So I don't know. I can't really find an argument for that. I got to agree with Paziano, man.
Yeah, indeed, and think about this, Patrick. So many Mike Tyson stories are also hip hop stories, like his fight with Mitch Green in Harlem, outside of Dapper Dan's boutique.
Dapper Dan.
Hip hop story,
Man, Tyson got the best stories, man. His whole history, man, and his upbringing is, it just makes him a hip hop legend, man. Period.
I remember I grew up in Montana, and my dad and I went to see. I guess it was pay-per-view, Hagler Sugar Ray, when my man Marvin got robbed.
That was my
but then Tyson came on. All of his fights were on HBO, which is crazy to me now. And that is part of beyond being the baddest man in the world, but also you could kind of follow him. And when you say, I know boxing's still mainstream, I know it has huge fans, but if you're a guy who just kind of wants to watch fights here and there, or casual, it's so hard to follow any of it. And I would say kind of the same with hip hop now. Again, I'm 50, but SoundCloud, I don't know how to do this, but Tyson was also kind of the last. Almost all of his fights were on HBO, at least the early ones, and that was pay TV. That was something else. I'm old enough to remember ABC fights, but I also think that was part of what Tyson's appeal was. You could just sit down and watch him.
You know, times are changing though. You look at the zone, a lot of the big fighters now fight on an app. So, you know, I mean, the way we listen to music changes. You know, I was streaming Bronze's new album today when I was driving to work. Like, you know, we listen to music different ways.
See, I bought it so you could get more money, Bronze. I purchased it.
you ain't knowing you, man.
I heard that.
That's love, Sauer, man. Word.
Hey, but listen, that's the thing is like times change, man. And I think like, you know, from my students that I teach, you know, they think of Mayweather as like the hip hop boxing guy. They think of his relationship with 50 Cent. So, you know, history repeats itself. The cultural mediums change, but the connection between hip hop and boxing, I would argue, is just as tight as it's ever been, even though that you got to have the app or what, you know, buy the pay-per-view to watch the big fights. I think the hip hop community is tuned in a way that maybe other genres are not, or other cultures are not.
I will say I went to a premier boxing event. I think it was 2016. It's been a little while, but that was a full-on hip-hop show. I mean, from start to finish. It was Garcia versus Paulie Magliani. How do I even know how to say his last name? But that was an entirely hip-hop driven show with the MF Doom masks and the whole.
Oh, wow.
And it was cool. It's amazing. That's the thing. Going to that live is incredible. And
it's energy, good energy, man.
Yeah, and you know, one of the folks I interviewed for the book was Justin Hoffman, who's the DJ for Top Rank and ESPN, and he sets up turntables and DJs live at the fights.
Yeah,
and you know, he's tapped into who the fighters are and where they're from. So if it's a Brooklyn fighter, he's playing some Biggie, he's playing, you know, he's putting on the Brooklyn artist. If it were a, you know, an artist from Detroit, maybe he's throwing on Eminem. And of course, Bronze, you got some Michigan connections. You grew up around the same neighborhood as Mayweather and his family, correct?
Absolutely, man. Same high school and everything, man. You know, so they have a history of you know, big support in Grand Rapids in this area. So you know, the whole family's there, man. So we always supported that side, and you know, it's Grand Rapids all the way, man. You know what I mean?
My wife's mother and the family's from Grand Rapids.
Salute.
Shout out to Zernies. There you
Salute.
go. Let's talk a little bit about 50 and Mayweather. That seemed to get uglier. Their relationship seemed to get ugly in a way that I'm actually surprised there wasn't something that really went off, especially when I did not know that 50 Cent was doing Mayweather can't read Cat in the Hat illiterate jokes. And I don't know Mayweather's you know, level of literacy, but I imagine he can read Cat in the Hat. That is brutal stuff. And
yeah, that was nasty. I think he challenged him to do a Harry Potter page or something like that. I remember that, man. But I'm totally riding with Mayweather on this, man. I think it evolved into, like, you know, not to be that guy, but some childish jokes. You know what I mean? I think he was talking about his facial hair and all this weird stuff. It kind of looked like an attention grab to me from 50, bro, because
could you tell, Bronze, if something was getting ugly in a real way versus
yeah, man. Yeah, it'll be some real action behind that. You know, now when dudes see each other, nothing happens. You know what I mean? It's just more, you know, back and forth talk at this point, man. It'd be foolish for either one of them to really, you know, get into
both men are businessmen, I think, and they're both entrepreneurs and both extremely
rich and very rich.
Very rich guys. And I feel like it was about, you know, throwing dirt on another guy's name. And I did document the history in my book. I did outline the long, and I had to do my research to get all these tweets right and get all the, you know, the YouTube videos right. But the reason I wanted to tell that story, Patrick, is with Tupac and Tyson, we see this sort of endearing friendship that has a tragic end. Well, with 50 and Floyd, I feel like in the early days, they were on the verge of surpassing Tyson and Pac in the sense that they were wanting to do a promotion company together. They were going to actually work together to merge the two cultures and make a lot of money. And whether it was egos or disappointments in each other, it has this tragic turn where they become enemies, or at least social media enemies. And I wanted to document that history too, because boxing and hip hop doesn't always get along. And in all the interviews I did, people were not in lockstep in how they felt about some of these issues. Some of the folks I interviewed hated the hip hop ring walk, rappers and boxers. They feel like it doesn't sound good, too many people screaming on the mic, the acoustics aren't good. And, you know, I wanted to highlight that side of the relationship too. Even though I think boxing and hip hop is one big family, families don't always get along. And I thought Mayweather and 50 Cent allowed me to tell that story.
You know, I think you're on point with that because as much as I love the ring walk and the connections, as a producer, when I hear, I think Conway the Machine came out with Caleb Plant some time ago. I couldn't hear shit. I couldn't hear the music. I really couldn't hear his bars. So I don't know if Plant can hear that good and clear, but if we're doing this for energy, if we're doing this to represent where we're from, sometimes it doesn't come across clear. You know what I mean? So that's a good point, man. Definitely.
Do you think, do you guys think that, because you kind of hint about it in the book a little bit, I think Adrian Bronner, is that how you say it, Bronner, had problems beyond what I'm about to ask, and he has a lot of other issues going on. Yeah. But do you think that some dudes get too caught up in the idea of the hip hop, of being a hip hop star to the detriment of boxing, or is that just the latest? You know, I just watched 42-1 the other day. I had not actually seen the documentary. I'd forgotten that Tyson didn't do shit and paid for it. I mean, is this just a newer version of guys buying restaurants or hanging out in nightclubs? It's just they have more money.
One thing I wanted to point out with AB is I wanted to kind of humanize him for readers, because AB grew up wanting to be a rapper first. He wanted to be a rapper, and then boxing's what he found his way in. And, you know, a lot of the folks I talked to started out wanting to do one thing, gravitated to the other. 50 Cent started out wanting to be a boxer. He boxed in the New York area amateur scene. Willie D from the Ghetto Boys was a boxer and eventually fought professional. So, like, one of the reasons I wanted to highlight AB is that his first love was hip hop. And he was hanging around with the wrong people, making a lot of mistakes. He'd been arrested plenty of times before he was 18. And, you know, he was headed down a wrong path, and it was boxing that saved him. But once he got the money and clout and respect, he started doing the hip hop stuff. So it's not like he was just riding the trend. He was someone who grew up wanting to be a rapper. That was his first love. Now, most people would argue AB's downfall was he was doing too much of the other stuff. And it's very hard to be a rapper and a boxer. Even the great Roy Jones, who was one of my favorite fighters, really struggled to do both. So I don't know, Bronze, if you want to speak to that as far as AB and Roy go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that, like, coming from some of the backgrounds we come from, whatever you're doing, you're looking for that avenue, you know what I mean? And sometimes you might start in rap, and the rap game and the music industry is tough. It's 90% no, and 10% okay, maybe, yeah. So I think, and I ain't gonna front, I've seen this even in my own group. When dudes put something down, they put their blood, sweat, and tears into like an album or something, and it comes out and it doesn't do what they want. It doesn't bring them immediately 100,000. I think dudes get discouraged, and I think different people have different personalities, where some people might say, oh, let me take another shot at it. Some people might be like, yo, this ain't working. Let me find another avenue. And I think that's the crux someone like Adrian Broner will find himself at. Like, yo, the rap thing isn't doing what I expected, but I'm good at this over here. Let me follow this trail. So I think sometimes when we come from situations where we're just trying to see that light, get that success, whatever role we turn into that has that light, we might go that way. And then once we get situated, get everything together, then it's okay, boom. Now let me get back to my first love. So I think that's when Broner came back and was like, all right, I'm back to a street rapper now. I think he said that at one point. And I think that's the whole plot right there. You know what I mean? It starts out, you try to do what you want to do. It might not work how you want. So you go left because that's working. And then once something successful works for you, you swing back around to what you really want to do. You know, it's needs versus wants.
With AB and Roy Jones, they both had fathers who pushed them into boxing. They didn't really have much of a choice, to be honest. When they were kids, they both were boxing at 8 or 9 years old. Roy Jones, when he broke from his father early into his career, that's when he starts making his own rap songs. That's when he founds Bodyhead Entertainment. So you see a lot of these guys were sort of pushed into the sport. In boxing, that's how it happens a lot. I mean, my dad was a boxing trainer. I understand, like, sometimes you just grow up in it and you never get to pick what your
There's a
first
difference
love.
though. I don't think most people think they can box for whatever reason. Going back to its earliest days, everybody thinks they can rap. That's why they're white guys with their hats turned back doing this. That has been a thing for 40 years. Like, if you just rhyme with, my daughter was rapping the other day and she wasn't even like, you're not even rhyming. Start with that.
I would argue that there are a lot of guys who think they can fight and can't too. Go to any boxing gym, you'll meet a couple.
That's probably true.
And you know what else is? It's like too, like I think the same thing is true with boxing is with rap. Like, as many times as you go to the gym, you're gonna improve. If you keep going, you're gonna improve. So I think with rap, like, it was certain points early in my career where I'm like, yo, I'm the illest. Nobody can mess with me on the mic. And then, like, 5 years later, I'm looking at my old stuff like, dog, I could have did this better, and this better. So I think that comes, you know, that's that ego thing, man. You want to be the best. You're always the best at that certain point until you realize you can get even better. You know what I mean?
There's so many levels to both worlds. And I think, like, for instance, imagine the first time you found yourself next to the RZA, or when you got Ghostface in that booth. Yeah. Like, you know, there's levels to this. And I feel like, you know, fighters go through that same sort of trajectory of their careers where they fight in the amateur scene, they fight up the ranks, and then they find themselves across the ring from James Toney or Roy Jones or a guy like Floyd Mayweather. And I think it's like, you never are just a rapper forever or a boxer forever. You got to prove it every time you climb through the ropes and get in the booth. Every time you got to prove it.
Right.
I want to say, if anyone has a question, you'll get it asked, because we have none about beatboxing available at Greenlight. See, look at the salesmanship. Let me ask you, there aren't a lot of rappers who've gone into middle age, continued, other than being sort of godheads. Jay-Z had the one album about cheating on Beyonce. It was kind of interesting. I haven't listened to it a lot, but it was sort of interesting that he did that. But they can kind of, you know, go and work on CSI or whatever the hell LL Cool J's on. Unfortunately, aging boxer is not the same thing. And I wonder just how you guys feel now that you're old enough to have seen some of these guys. And now, I mean, Tyson actually seems to have righted himself well enough, and he's got the weed company and he was on Broadway, for God's sakes. But, you know, in general, it's like, if you escape the rap game as a younger guy, like in the 90s, you're going to have a fine life. Boxing's the opposite. I just wanted to talk about that, just knowing, and you can talk, you know, you can throw the NFL in there too, but we're not talking about that, but just knowing what you know.
Both traditionally have been a young person's game, obviously, you know, for different reasons. But hip hop is so young. If you really think about it, hip hop is still only like 40 years old. Hip hop is still pretty young. So, you know, we're seeing guys like Jay-Z and Diddy and, you know, Eminem, and a lot of these guys still remain relevant into their 50s. Dr. Dre, who's going to do the halftime show at the, you know, Super Bowl. They're still, you know, we're still
nostalgia acts though. They're mostly nostalgia acts though, which is fine. I like nostalgia acts, but it's because when you hit 50, you don't have that much to say.
I mean, you know what? I gotta go with, I think that as boxers age, they lose their skills and talents. I think it's the same with certain MCs. You got your outliers. You got Jay-Z, who's older and still doing it at a high level. You got GZA, who's 50 plus, doing it at a high level still. But I think that most people as MCs, as they get later in their career, you kind of be like, man, what happened to the bars, man? Like, they're not as strong as they used to be. I can't really get with it. So I kind of take it on a tangent and say that as boxers age and their talents slowly, you know, slow down, just like anything else. NFL, running backs, as they get older, them knees wear down, man. They're not as tough. They can't go as long as they used to. I think it's the same with rappers, and I think it has to do with what's innate. Like some rappers, like I say, like I'll say GZA, like he still comes very precise with the bars. There's no drop off where you'd be like, yo, this ain't on the level of this over here. It's still this same quality level. But I definitely think you got rappers where you'd be like, man, what happened?
You get tired. You're old. You're tired. You're tired all the
There's
time.
a couple things too. You think about it this way too. Bronze, I want your opinion on this one, Bronze.
Yeah.
The great Rocky Marciano said the day he knew he wanted to retire is when he would go to the gym and he smelled it. He's like, I didn't even like the smell of the gym anymore, because he had made it. He had made some money. His life was comfortable. He didn't have the same hunger. Do you think it works that way in hip hop too? That once you've achieved all your dreams and got the plaques and got the cars and taking care of your mom and this and that you don't have the same passion to write or create? I do. I think that with success comes a little bit of complacency, and no matter what you're doing, you know what I mean? You as a professor, you might say you break the bank and you got a Scrooge McDuck money bin. I wish
that next class you might not want to go so crazy at. Like you still gonna do your job, but like I think that, like I say, when you get to a certain level, I think you get to a bit of complacency, and like I've been there before. Like I drop an album, I get a nice advance, and I know I gotta do another album, but it's not as much of as a priority because I'm already doing good, and handling all the things I need to handle. So I think there's that battle between being complacent versus if it's your real innate passion. You know what I mean?
There's a lot
boxers don't seem to get the
that too. You're right.
Yeah, word up.
Boxers don't seem to get the Tyson seems to be an exception. They don't get that career sort of like retro love thing in which a lot of rappers, I think they do TV or commercials. I mean, Snoop Dogg, I don't know, whatever Corona's paying Snoop Dogg, that's 2 days worth of work. Like, right. I mean, how do you turn that down? There's no way on earth. Like, it's only $5 million for you to walk along a beach for a couple of days,
right?
And that's it. But
that's akin to like George Foreman still working the commercials.
That's true.
You get your personality out there as part of your main profession, and you could drag that out as long as you need. You know what I mean?
See Sugar Ray Leonard. There have been fighters who've been able to gravitate to that part of their career. It's rare though, as you mentioned, Patrick. It isn't. Most fighters don't get that, and fighters don't have pensions. They don't have retirement plans.
Yeah, it sucks. We need to play the clip, which is from Bronze's new album, Ekphrasis. It's called Survivor's Vow. And I went back and forth on mentioning this because anybody who's watched the show, I've mentioned this already this year. I thought last year would be one of the worst years ever. My dad died. We're the worst of COVID. He did not die of COVID, but he was older. It was awful. I think we turn the page, we get vaccinated. Then my mom dies of COVID. My favorite uncle, who was older, a Jesuit priest, Uncle Tony, rest in peace, died last month. And hanging over all that, though, this COVID thing, I don't know. I thought we'd be a lot farther along, and I know most people are doing the right thing, but a lot aren't. Anyway, not to bring the whole thing down, but the song we're going to play a clip from is called Survivor's Vow. Yeah. Bronze, tell us just the 30 seconds what the story is, because it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. So Survivor's Vow is just like an angelic song. I lost my brother in 2014. He had a heart condition, and he ended up getting blood clots, and he passed away from an enlarged heart. So this right here, I'm really, in the song, I'm actually talking and writing a message to his ashes as I speak to him on how I'm going to live it up twice as good since he's gone. So that's my survivor's vow, you know what I mean?
Living it up twice as good on Squawkin Sports. This is exactly what you were thinking of.
Indeed, baby.
Tails chopping on the Aretha loops. We gon' flip this music to a Tesla too. I'm the illest nigga. Bet she tests the fruit. Stuff a 2-ounce cone, shaman with the roots. Yellow Othello, lobotomy coupe. My brother died, I saw stars when he flew. Oh, I spoke to you in heaven. Now that's uploading. The bullpup spit if it's goaded. The pull-up man soul lifted the homie. I shot her straight through the front and got lowly. You told me show up and drop the hot biscuit over old grease. Zola frame, loading aim, stars falling on me. Changed my words into paint, it's like Marcelo Gandhi's. Told him to his urn, I'ma spill you in the palm trees. Palming 2 queens of calm breeze while down in Kiwis, my haunted scenes. I splash light with the pen. Hate to see you on that gurney, but you look fly with wings. The pine box wasn't designed for us kings, so I spoke into his ashes, let me represent him. Nigga, I'ma get a hologram for Coachella. I'ma catch a goat, taxidermy for the hall entrance. Promise I'ma ball extra, diamonds on Siennas, fence electric. Cremated ashes stashed inside my necklace. Neon tanks for the cichlids. Heard them whisper, you the sickest, nigga.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You look fly with wings. That's a good one.
Yeah, man. Absolutely, man. Had to, you got to face that tough shit and still, come out the storm. So, trying to find a positive and a negative, man. And God rest your lost ones, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man.
I did not dig out my mom's urn because I didn't want to get super depressed on her. So let's end on a high note. Let's take this final green light show out on a high note.
Word up.
Give me your favorite boxing lyric. And mine's ridiculous. It's just I got like Don King, I got a crazy hairdo. I've been laughing at that for I don't know, 25 years, just because the pitch of Mike D's voice at the I got a crazy hairdo.
Well, mine is we already mentioned it earlier, but mine is smoke on the mic, like smoking Joe Frazier, and that's because
Wu-Tang Christmas pictures right here.
I love an underdog. So when Joe Frazier won, that was like, for me, that was well deserved, and it was a real champion's victory. So that line always stuck with me the most, man. Absolutely, man. My boy Dak.
Yeah, I don't know if I can pick one in particular, but I'll tell you my favorite hip hop boxing song is by Wu-Tang. It's called the MGM. It's off Wu-Tang Forever.
Yeah.
And I think True Master did the track to that one, if I'm right. I love that song so much because it's at the fictional rematch of a fight between Pernell Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez. Their first fight, which happened in real life, was a draw, and there was never a rematch. Most people thought Sweep, he got robbed. So Ghostface and Raekwon.
That is a deep topic. Like that's a deep boxing topic.
So it's like they're at this imaginary boxing thing talking about seeing Deion Sanders in the crowd and all this stuff. And it's just so creative. And it just shows you how much hip hop folks think about boxing, that anyone who's a fight fan and a Wu-Tang fan hears that song. I mean, that's all we got. We didn't get a rematch in real life. I don't know Wu-Tang very much.
Beautiful.
Well, I think Bronze. I do think you maybe tonight need to rectify the Joe Louis v. Jerry Cooney number of shout outs. That is just the Bronze Bomber. All right, hold on. We have a question. We have one last of the year, last green light show question from Peter Quadrino. Just want to throw it as a topic of discussion. I will let you two. Oh, wait, we have another question. All right, let's make it quick. We got two. Cannabis second round KO featuring Mike Tyson. I guess the question is, good song is, I don't know what the actual question is, but what are your thoughts on that song?
That's a great one, man. I thought, I thought Biss won that shit, man. I think LL came out with a song with like 12 verses trying to react to that. And Biss still won that, man. That's my dude, man. I love LL too, but yo, Biss killed that shit, man.
Hey, I love both those guys, but I feel like that song was dope because he had Tyson on the track and everything. And that's a famous hip hop battle to a certain generation of people. He kind of dusted off LL, got LL back in the game, got him fired up. Cannabis is a legendary underground battle rapper type of dude. I love Cannabis, and I think let's be honest. It got people talking and probably did, help both guys get a little bit of shine and get their careers moving. So, I think it was a good thing for boxing. A lot of people like to clown Tyson's part on that song, but look, Floyd Mayweather did the same thing in a song to Ludacris. There are other fighters who've done that. Roy Jones did that in a song. I thought it was cool. As someone who loved hip hop and boxing, I like that song. Had Wyclef playing Michael Buffer in the video. I loved it. I thought it was cool.
I thought it was great as well.
I'm going to ask this question, even though we're going a couple minutes over, because this has fascinated me for a long time. So this is from Sean Chandler, a dude I went to high school with. He's from Harlem. It is Harlem, Montana. His question is, and we might switch it a little bit, but probably a long shot. Any references to any American Indian, Native American boxers? He's Native American. that you found? And if not, I would just generally ask about indigenous rap in general. Why? Because I know it's out there, but how come it hasn't really ever taken off or found an audience outside of their own community?
I don't have a reference for him, unfortunately. But look, I don't think my list in the back of the book is the only list. There are lots of songs that, didn't make the list. As far as like indigenous hip hop, there's hip hop in Brazil and Japan, all over the world. And Germany loves hip hop in Germany. So I feel like, hip hop, maybe like what we hear on the radio. We hear Drake and we hear Travis Scott and certain 5 or 6 artists, Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. But like hip hop is bigger than just what's on the radio or what's on the television. I think, there's hip hop everywhere. Even where I'm from in West Virginia, there were people putting bluegrass samples to rap music. Like hip hop is bigger than just the radio and stuff. So, just because something's not on the charts doesn't mean it's not super dope and isn't hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to any certain specific genre of rap, people don't go around and look. People don't search. They might turn on the radio and just listen to that. So I would say, whatever form of rap, and definitely if it's indigenous people rap and you want to get it out there more, or you're worried about why it's not being heard, the number one issue in the rap game is promotion. You know what I mean? Promotion is the piece that costs the most. So promotion is often a piece of hip hop in the hip hop game or a hip hop release that gets overlooked and left, let me throw this album out here. So whatever you're working on, whatever genre, it's all about that promotion, man. That's why boxers, that's why the pre-fights get built up to be so big and people, go back and forth because they're selling it, man. It's part of the promotion. So that's just that jewel right there. You know what I mean?
Good connection.
Well, I hope the indigenous Eminem is from Montana. particularly from Hardin, Crow Nation, right by me. Here's the book. It's great. If you're interested in either topic, you'll love it. There it is. This is the last show of the year.
Go buy it.
Go buy it. Buy it from Greenlight or your favorite local indie.
Beatboxing.
But buy it from Greenlight though.
But buy it from Greenlight.
Buy it from Greenlight.
I just want to say, I hope in another trying year, if the show has been a little, we try to highlight books on the show that are not sports books are a tough sell anyway, and they're usually only the celebrity ones do well, and we never have those. So if at any point this year, anybody who tuned in, thank you. Give a shout out to Dave and his wife. They're both down for the count right now. So Dave.
Hey, feel better, bro.
Get better, Dave. Hey, Patrick, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you to Greenlight. Thank you to the Bronze Man. Y'all go check out his album, stream it or buy it. Just go check it.
It's very good. Very good. All right. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody. Let's have a better 22. Take us out, Kate.
Please.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Patrick and Bronze and Todd. I am neither a hip hop or a boxing person. And yet I was like, sure. Yeah, that sounds really fascinating. So thank you for making this such an engaging event. David, we missed you. And yeah, it's been a hard 2 years. Yeah. So thank you, Patrick, and to David, who's not here, for making your series something that folks have tuned into and looked forward to. And we will see you next year.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Much love, y'all.